Hello and welcome to another episode of the Sales Syndicate podcast. So I think last week's or this week's, I should say, was a chat with Chili Piper. So if you haven't checked that out, please go and have a listen. But this week we're going to be talking about, varying, pathways into sales, and the fact that I think there must be 50 different salespeople I speak to on a weekly basis, and every single one of them has got a slightly different path that they've taken into sales. But before we sort of move on into the conversation, I will hand over to my guest to introduce himself. So over to you, Dineesha.
Hi, thanks for the introduction, Jamie. My name's Dineesha, and I'm an SDR working for a company called PayFit, selling payroll software. Not the most glamorous of things, but definitely something we all need. Yeah.
And I think you were just saying before we hit the record button that you suddenly started feeling nervous an hour before the podcast.
Especially when you mentioned the company before, then I felt the nerves sink in slightly. Like that's some big shoes to fill.
No pressure, no pressure. I'm sure you'll be absolutely fine. But I think the reason I brought up the fact you felt nervous is now the ice is broken. We can sort of move on and crack on without you feeling overly nervous or pressurized or anything. So, like we said, we're going to be talking about, I guess, the different ways in which people get into sales, the different reasons why people get into sales. But I guess before we can sort of talk about the sales part of it, we've got to learn about where you came from in terms of your career. So do you want to just give us a bit of a history in terms of your career up to this point?
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm like one of the anomalies into like the sales sort of profession. I know most people after university they go straight into sales, but I actually used to be a civil engineer. So I actually studied at Cardiff University. My bachelor's was civil and environmental engineering. After doing my 3 years, I was still very keen and fixated on, yes, engineering is my profession. And I actually pursued a master's in it, in structural engineering. Then I landed my dream job with Jacobs, the engineering company, not the cracker company. Just to put that out there.
There is a degree of engineering involved in a cracker, but not quite
There
that much.
definitely is. The ratio of cheese to biscuit. There's a golden ratio to that for sure. But no, not sorry to disappoint. It's more like infrastructure and tidal defences. So I worked as a civil engineer for about 4 years. 4 years. And during COVID, I had like a moment of reflection. And I mean, probably the same for you, Jamie, as well. Like, you probably had so much time to sit there and like think and reflect about your life and what you really want to get out of life. And that's basically what I went through during COVID. And I think one day I just sort of woke up and realized that I wasn't really enjoying engineering as a profession. And I look back at all the odd summer jobs I did over the years. I'm someone who's worked since the age of 16. Every summer I was always like grinding, grafting. Um, and yeah, and the roles that I really enjoyed and really thrived in were all sales related. Jamie, you've heard of charity street fundraisers, right?
Yes, I
Those
have. Yep.
annoying people in the streets with the bright coloured jackets and the iPads.
Yeah, I've actually got an electric fence now, which
Okay,
seems to be
all right.
doing the trick.
Yeah, it was probably someone like me who probably annoyed you in the past. But yeah, I did that during like my summer periods, stopping people on the streets. Really tough job. If you want to know what character building is, I would recommend doing charity street fundraising. Rain, shine, heat, you're still expected to meet targets. And yeah, so I'm going off a bit of a tangent here, but back to the story. I sat there reflecting and I really enjoyed the role of the charity street fundraising side of things. I worked at the London Eye, which was like a commission based role. And I really got a thrill of like being at the top of the leaderboard and making like all that extra commission that was going to basically blow later as a student anyway. But yeah, and that was it. That sort of was like the final. It's almost like the straw that broke the camel's back, because over the years I've had my uncle whispering into my ear, get into sales, get into sales. And I'd always smile and just sort of giggle and be like, no, I want to be an engineer. But I think one day I just rocked up to his house and just said, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And the light in his eyes was just something else. I've never seen him so happy before.
No, it's interesting you mentioned the COVID thing, because I think like to your point, COVID
Mm,
seemed to be this weird line in the sand where everyone had a wake up call of why am I in this job, or why do I live here, or why am I with this person, even in some situations. And I think there
yeah.
was a record number of divorces, record number of breakups, but a record number of people moving jobs as well. And I think it really did make people realize they valued enjoyment, like enjoying work a lot more. And perhaps, like you said, if you're not enjoying it, then you kind of look back at what you did enjoy. And yeah, it's interesting. I guess the charity, like, it was probably the most raw form of sales, like that. You walking down, you went to uni in Cardiff. You're walking down Queen Street in Cardiff, and you'll
Yeah,
probably get stopped 3 or 4 times by the people trying to sell you the
definitely.
charity wristbands, and they've all got card readers now, right? It's not cash, it's card readers. They know
Yeah,
what they're doing.
they've got with the
Um,
times.
yeah,
It's not buckets and put in notes. We're going contactless these days.
yeah. I think so the engineering, like you said, you worked for Jacobs. What sort of, you said, was it tidal? Is that why you studied in Cardiff, because of the tidal barrage there?
Um, that wasn't actually the reason. I actually got into Cardiff University through clearing, to be completely transparent. I don't know how I ended up at Russell Group through clearing. Must have been super lucky. But yeah, it was just when you're a grad, you're sort of just applying for so many grad schemes, and you have like these top engineering companies. So you've got like the Arup, the Atkins, the Jacobs, the PWC, not PwC, WSP, and these are like almost like the big four, but for engineering.
So the equivalent of a PwC, Deloitte.
Yeah, that's why
Yeah,
PwC came up
yeah,
my
that's like
mouth
a
earlier. I got my letters mixed up, but yeah, like WSP is like the PwC of like engineering, and generally you're applying for very sort of generic grad schemes. And it was very generic, so I had no idea what I was going to get into. And as a grad, you're like, any opportunity, you'll just like pounce onto that.
yeah. No, so in 4 years you were in engineering,
Yeah.
which is actually longer than I was expecting. I thought you were going to say you did it for 6 months and despised it, but in those 4 years you must have done some pretty cool projects.
Yeah. So going to like the specifics of what I did, I was actually in asset management, and it was a lot of, it wasn't super technical, it's very project management-y. And I was on a program. So like you have like programs like Crossrail and HS2. I was on a flood defense one called Team 2100, which actually stands for Thames Estuary Asset Management. And one of the projects I actually worked on was the Thames Barrier.
Oh,
I
nice.
did, yeah, I did the drainage design and calculations. So if the drainage is messing up right now, don't look at me.
Well, London's not renowned for its water cleanliness or drainage, I guess. So
Yeah.
yeah, think of that what you will.
Why do you think I made the exit into
Yeah,
sales?
yeah.
Timely.
It wasn't COVID. It was the build up of
Yeah.
sewage in London. Um,
Definitely.
so, how did you go about it then? So you're in engineering. I get. Was it like a slow sort of phase out, as and you're like, right, I think I want to leave, or was it literally, I'm going to hand in my notice and start looking for sales jobs?
I would say it was like phased. So it was just initial thought, and then that thought became multiple thoughts, and then time passed in COVID, and I felt like I was almost at a crossroads where I was thinking either I take engineering super seriously and work towards getting my chartership, or I just take a huge risk and do something completely different. I obviously went with the latter. Um, but yeah, I think I would say over a span of months, I finally came to that decision. And then come December 2021, I found a job and I put my notice in.
And that was 2021. That was still COVID, wasn't it?
Mm,
And that was, we did a recording
ish,
last
yeah.
week, and they were talking about they had been in sales 10 years, and they said, like, we're now in the toughest market of the 10 years, but COVID was the most ridiculous market of the 10 years. So what was it like going into sales during that ridiculous high, basically?
So again, it was a bit of a rocky journey. I got my first role with a startup company called We Are Eight, and that was in January I started. But unfortunately, due to like the nature and like the high risk side of startups, all of us SDRs were made redundant within like a few months. Um, so yeah, it's not the most positive things. Like you're really excited and optimistic about going to a new profession, and then within like 3 months you're told you're redundant. And then I was back looking for roles again, which was slightly disappointing, I would say.
And in that moment, was there a part of you that thought you might have made the wrong mistake leaving the fairly stable job and sort of trying sales?
Yeah, I think at this point I started to realize that sales is a bit more riskier and engineering was quite stable. But I felt like 2 or 3 months in a profession, I don't feel like you're giving sales much of a chance. So I went through like the second wave of interviews and applications to land my second sales job, which again didn't last very long, but for a different range of reasons.
So what was the, if you can tell us about the
Yeah,
range of reasons
I'm
that
happy to
yeah that
tell you. I'm
I don't
happy
know,
to spill the tea.
it was as if you were suggesting there was some sort of legal ramifications or lawsuit, but yeah, go on.
Not that bad, but it was pretty bad. So I work for a company. I'm not going to disclose the name, just because I don't feel comfortable. But anyway, it was just think of Wolf of Wall Street, right?
Okay.
Now, that was my work environment almost. There was like a bell every time someone made a sell. Um, Everyone was white. I was like one of the few females and females of color as well. There was casual racism, casual sexism, open talk about drugs, and just really inappropriate work stuff that I've never come across, and just like generic gaslighting from managers. And it was probably like one of the worst work environments I've like ever faced.
Like, yeah, if you were going to make a list of like the five worst things that that you could basically, as in like you could walk into in a company,
Definitely.
that you've pretty much
Yeah.
you've hit that, you've called bingo there on yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Basically, the five worst things, and knowing my luck, those were the five worst things I endured. So I was there for like 6 weeks. Jamie, like it was absolutely awful. I had to go into work every day, which made it worse because I had to like actually be in the physical presence of these horrible people. And then I remember crying on my train journeys as well. Like I don't want to make this like an emotional sort of podcast, but
No, but I,
it was really horrible. Like it was
to
quite
give
like
a, I guess, a bit of an insight, we are going to be talking about the highs and lows shortly, and I guess
yeah.
this is a perfect example of, like, so
Definitely.
your first two jobs in sales,
Mm.
as we've sort of just spoken about, they didn't pan out for various reasons.
No.
One because the startup just didn't work. The second because it was an awful working environment, like textbook the cliche sales left, right, and
Yeah.
center in terms of like behavior and issues, I guess. So your third role, is that the role you're in now?
Yes. Touch wood. Um, yeah, that's my third role. So I started PayFit around July time last year. So I've been here for I can't do
Nearly a
maths
year.
right now. Yeah, nearly a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how are you
Um,
finding the current role then?
oh, when I joined PayFit, like the first week, the culture was the complete opposite to the second role, and I was actually crying like tears of happiness because I didn't I felt like I finally found a company where there was like good values, good culture, and somewhere where I feel like I'd actually be able to like develop my skills within sales and create like a really good foundation. So yeah, I'm really enjoying it. Obviously with sales, like you touched on earlier, that there can be a lot of highs and lows, which is pretty normal. But my team are like there's such a nice bunch of people. My manager's lovely, and yeah, I actually feel happy coming into work.
Which I guess is exactly what you were looking for. Like you said, when you left engineering, you just weren't happy. You weren't getting
Yeah,
enough from going to work, and now you do. So you've gone from two of probably the biggest lows since graduating, the first two
definitely.
jobs, and now you're on riding the high. Let's say,
Yeah.
even though it's a tough market. So do you want to just give us a few of the highs aside from the great culture and stuff, like any good stories off the back of a year?
Yeah, highs. There's been quite a few. Loads of amazing socials at PayFit, but I would say one of my recent highs was booking the highest number of demos, like for myself, like a personal record, and that was in February. And yeah, it was that sense of like satisfaction and just knowing, like, yeah, maybe I think I can sell. That
Like
realization.
how many did you book in February? Go on.
6 demos.
And what is your title? Are you a SDR?
Yeah, I'm an SDR, so AE soon come.
Yeah. So we've covered, like I said, some of the lows, some of the highs. So
Mm,
how have you learned to deal with? Because I guess engineering, it was a relatively stable, right? Stable four
yeah,
years, not many highs, not many
definitely.
lows. Engineers are always in need. There's not much risk of layoffs
Yeah.
and startups failing and stuff. So how have you managed, or how have you learned to cope with the just the peaks and troughs?
So with like the peaks, I would say they're fairly easy to manage. When you're on a high, you're so happy and you think like everything's just amazing and perfect. But when you have like the lows, I think it's really easy to get caught up in the moment. Um, just things not working out, be it not booking enough demos 1 month, or in my case, earlier on in my sales career, not landing the sort of job that I really wanted. But I think it's that determination to just keep going and looking at the bigger picture. I think sometimes you have to look back and realize, almost think about why you're doing what you're doing. And once you go back to your why, it becomes easy to start focusing on the positives and becoming more solution focused as opposed to just welling in like the pits of despair, which is like really easy to do in like a sales environment. You could have like 5 calls in a row that go absolutely terrible. John, the CFO, the other day hanging up, like I only said one word and he just hung up on me. Like it's really, really easy to get down in the dumps, but I think the main thing is just perseverance, remembering your why, and just focusing on the positives.
Yeah, it's interesting you said that you always tend to focus on the negatives. There's the saying, isn't it, that someone who has a good experience with software might only tell one other person, but people who have a bad experience with software will tell 10 people. And it's just like, it's the same sort of thing, isn't it? Like you you'll remember the lows for weeks to come, but you fairly often don't look back at the mini wins or the
Yeah,
success stories,
definitely.
which is bad actually. So I guess, like, in coming from the engineering background, what is there anything that you've like brought from those 4 years? The, I don't know, the structure, the sort of day to day that has actually been relevant or useful in your
Yeah.
current sort of role?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. I think like at an initial glance, most people would look at engineering, look at sales and think, how, like, where is the connection? But there most definitely is a connection because in a nutshell, engineering's all about problem solving. And a lot of people don't realize, but sales is also problem solving. Before I was solving engineering problems and forces and reactions, but now I'm solving the pain points of prospects. So you're still taking that problem solving attitude from engineering, but you're applying that to your sales career. And not only just with your sort of phone conversations with prospects, but suppose you're having a crappy month. It's being able to reflect and reverse engineer and figure out, why is my month not going well? How can I get from A to B? What does a good month look like? So again, it's the problem solving and the ability to analyze situations and even data as well.
Yeah, I was going to say, because I guess in working on the project based sort of setups that you spoke about,
Mm,
there would have been a, I guess you call it like an evaluation stage. Like, you finish the project, it's
definitely.
like, right, what went well, what didn't go well. We overspent 5 billion. I don't know. Let's say we overspent 5 billion
Yeah.
on why did we overspend 5 billion? So uh, I guess, have you found it? Have you literally been able to bring like processes from engineering into sales and just basically manipulate them?
Essentially, yeah, I think it's like the mindset, just like we use Cognism for like data. So I'm someone who likes numbers. Clearly, I did engineering, and sometimes looking at the numbers, how many connected calls I did 1 month, what does a successful week look like in terms of like number of dials? It's super helpful, like having that mindset of like what went well, what didn't go well, and being able to evaluate. And also sometimes when things aren't going really well, like we talked about, it can be easy to get really down about these things, but I think the best thing is to be solution focused. Instead of focusing on the problem, think about what are the different avenues, what are the different solutions. If method one's not working, is there a method two? Is there a method three? That is there even a method that I haven't even thought of? Sometimes you have to like swallow your pride and put your hands up and realize that there are areas where you might not be so great and you might have areas where you're weak, and it's just the ability to own up to that and almost ask for help, like not being afraid to ask for help. I think that's like super key.
Have you noticed? You spoke about sort of data and loving numbers and stuff. So, and you touched on cognizance. So, have you noticed any trends in call to connect rates, which I guess is very important for your role? So, what sort of trends, just out of curiosity, for sales in
Yeah,
general, like
definitely.
what have you noticed with call to connect rates in the last
um
few months?
Disclaimer, everyone, I'm not a sales LinkedIn influencer person. This is just from my own experience. But what I've found is calling mobile numbers after 5 p.m., the connection rate is amazing. Highly recommend. The same people that I tried speaking to during the day, during like regular work hours, I've managed to actually get them on the phone post 5 p.m. So I think after this session, I'm going to have a late dial session soon.
Yeah, no, one of our SDRs, he made the decision to shift his, he calls them power hours, and he basically shifted them to the least attractive hours in his day, as in, like, because if he wants lunch at 12 to 1, obviously everyone else wants lunch 12 to 1. So
Yeah,
he does a power hour late in the day, and he finds that um, having shifted his lunch, his call to connect rates go up because he's calling people when they're not sitting eating a sandwich, and actually,
yeah,
like, when they actually want to talk. So yeah, it's interesting actually. I'll mention it to him that because they extended their
definitely.
working hours to 6 p.m. because they found that, like you said, that they were getting really good like success rates between like 5 and 6, which is a good tip. But we you kind of touched on it earlier, but we were going to talk about that winning mindset that you've had to learn. So I guess it's kind of like there are highs and there are lows, but you've got slightly adapt your mindset to, like you said, focus on the high. So what that winning mindset, like, give us a bit
Hmm.
of an overview of what you mean by the winning mindset.
I think in my eyes, like the winning mindset doesn't just apply to sales. It can apply to like all aspects of life, be it hitting PBs at the gym, um, progressing in I kickbox as well, like progressing in belts for kickboxing, or just getting that 1% better each day. So in a nutshell, I would say a winning mindset for me is always striving to be better than what you were the day before. Um, always always having that sort of desire to just almost win, like not taking no for an answer. I suppose it's like the same thing you can apply to to your phone calls. You know, initially a prospect might not open up, but it's that persistence to keep going and asking questions where 5 minutes in, you realize actually the prospect does have pains because you didn't give up throughout the conversation. Um, so yeah, I would say perseverance is like super key. And I touched on this earlier, but asking for help, being vulnerable, and it's okay. Like we're not. I'm not Superwoman, and No one's expected to be perfect. But I think the main thing is being able to look at yourself and think, right, where are my weak spots? Okay, these are my weak spots. Who can I speak to that actually has some sort of like expertise in that area? And then go to them and get their advice and their knowledge, pick their brains. Like there's nothing wrong with asking for help. I think I bug my managers all the time because I'll have like a million questions. I think my manager Bobby can definitely agree with me there.
It's interesting you talk about the perseverance one. We had one today actually.
Mm,
One of the SDRs, he's been messaging someone on LinkedIn for weeks, like 8
yeah,
messages, no response, and he sent a GIF last week, a GIF this week, and he sent a GIF this morning. And
yeah,
the reply he got this morning was, "Send me your calendar, I'll book in." And it was like it took nine messages with no replies, and then
yeah,
a funny GIF, and eventually after what, say 2 months, he, like, the guy came back and said, "Yeah, let's book in." So if he had
yeah,
stopped after the first couple of messages, which most people have would have, then he wouldn't have won, like you sort of said.
yeah, definitely. I feel like I've got similar stories as well, with different prospects where I've been chasing them for months, different touch points, an email, a phone call, speaking to other people, um, where I thought that demo would have taken place in month one, ended up taking place in month four. But for me, I'm happy with the fact that I actually ended up sitting.
Yeah.
A lot of pushing. A lot of these prospects are very busy and they like to just sort of shuffle you to the side. So you have to kind of stand your ground and really show that value and think of different ways to like entice them into a demo.
Yeah, you were talking about like being analytical and looking at your own, I guess, successes, your own failures
Mm,
in terms of like your day to day. So like,
yeah.
do you have a standardized like process for that? Like, it's like, say I work in marketing, so it's a lot, I guess, easier for me at the end of a month to look at all of the figures and say, right, this is what changes, these are the changes I'm going to make for the next month. So
Hmm.
do you have like a standardized process or, thing that you go through?
So I've got like, sometimes when you've got like a big target in mind where you've got to book a certain number of demos, it can be overwhelming to think, oh, I've got this many demos, but the way I'll break it down is with like daily activities. So I have a rough idea of how many connects I need that could convert to a demo. So then I break that down into like daily activities. So what does that look like in terms of number of dials? What does that look like in terms of how many prospects I have to sequence? So I've got like a rough ballpark figure of dials, prospects I want to add into sequence um, every week. So yeah, I suppose I've created my own standardization without writing it on a document or anything. It's just something in my mind.
Yeah, like almost just like a KPI dashboard in
Yeah,
your mind.
yeah,
Um,
that's it.
yeah, and then so if you, for say, in the situation where you don't hit those KPIs that you've sort of set yourself, then is that when you would say, right, I didn't get the number of dials that I needed last week. Why was that?
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes I don't look at it from a weekly perspective. I might have a day where sometimes you have days where you just have so many meetings and that just eats into your dialing time or your prospecting time. Um, But the good news is you could always look back on the previous day and think, right, this was like the discrepancy, and I'm going to try and work that extra bit harder to make up for the lack of activity the day before. So in a way, your activity ends up averaging out to your sort of weekly target, or
Yeah, no,
the target in
yeah,
my mind.
yeah. No, I was good because yeah, like we've had like different managers where you've got those that are so heavily KPI driven, where it's like if
Yeah,
you even deviate by one call, it's like, right, you've missed your targets. And then there's others which are
yeah,
just like, look, as long as what comes out the other end is where your target needs to be, you could make two calls, I don't care. But if you're
yeah,
still booking the demos you need to book and you're still, closing deals, up to you how you do that. Um, but I think, yeah, it's almost like you said, you sort of own your own figures
yeah,
and hold yourself
definitely.
accountable, which is key to the highs and the lows. Because I think if you're not in control of your day to day, I think you tend to perhaps blame the lows on others rather than being accountable for them, like you've said.
Yeah, it's just made me think of what my manager always tells me. Well, us as a team, not just me, but control the controllables.
Yeah.
But so it's literally that.
Yeah, there's loads of cliche like your destiny is yours to control, and like it's up, like only you can change your future, and all those sort of like cliche things.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
it is true. Like if you're struggling to deal with the lows, then you've got to address, one, I guess, why there are lows, and two, how you can come out of the lows or whatnot. But
Yeah.
so two-ish years in sales now.
No, well, I started in January last year, so about a year and a half almost. Yeah.
And the year and a half you've had in sales versus the 4 years in engineering, like what's the comparison? Which did you make the right decision?
I think so. I think so. I think I can look back. In this point of time, I can look back and be like, yes, that was the right decision. If you ask me that question in my second sales role, the answer would have been completely different.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. I think it doesn't matter what industry you're in. If you walk into a company like that, then you must think you've made the worst decision of your life.
Yeah, definitely.
So, what do the next few years look like in terms of like your goals? So you're happy in sales. What are because I guess in engineering you would have had, like you said, you wanted to go for the chartership or whatever. So
Mm.
what are your goals for that winning in sales then?
Yeah. So I think right from the beginning, I've always known that I want to eventually be an account exec, or in other companies, they call it BDM. I don't know. I feel like the two terms are interchangeable, AE or a BDM. Um, so sort of short-term goals is being an account exec for like SMBs, but more of like a long-term goal for myself would be enterprise, so closing like really big high value deals in the next couple of years. So that's where I really, really want to be.
Well, there's a lot of money in enterprise sales, isn't there? I think that's got to be why, one of the main reasons why people want to go into enterprise, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. It's
And I guess perhaps it's looked at a bit more of like, I don't know, the elite. Is it almost like this, like the top league? It's like the Premier League of sales enterprise, isn't it? In terms of that, like,
yeah, I get that vibe as well. But the thing is, and be completely honest, I live in London. The rent's not getting any cheaper, so it has to be enterprise or
yeah.
nothing.
The trouble is, eventually everyone will be enterprise, and then the salaries will drop, and then there'll be some other new job title created.
Right, Jamie, we're focusing on the positives.
Right mindset, positive mindset. You're going to be a millionaire in 6 months. Okay, there you
Yeah,
go.
that's it. I like that.
No, look, it's been really great to have a chat about that sort of move from 4 years in engineering to SaaS, because I think on paper a lot of people would be like, "Why the hell did you make that decision?"
Yeah,
But ultimately, you're a lot more fulfilled now than you were before, right?
definitely. Yeah.
And I think there's a lot that can be sort of taken from that alone. But just before we like wrap things up, are there any like takeaways you'd offer up to people who are listening who might be thinking, "I hate the job I'm in"? Like, what advice would you give for people?
Just like general advice for anyone who hates their role.
Yeah, like because they could
Yeah,
be in
okay.
the sales role right now and they hate it, but I guess it's that thought process that people might be going through.
Yeah, definitely. And it's not an easy it's not an easy situation to be when you're not enjoying something and you just feel down about it. But what I would recommend is grab yourself a pen, piece of paper, and literally write down, basically evaluate your current position. And yeah, you might not be happy about your current position, but is it everything? Is it specific things about the role? Is it the pay? Is it the working hours? So I think the main thing is just to figure out the specifics and then start looking at, right, what can I change? Do I need to change my career, or is it just this specific job within my career sphere?
So almost the pros and cons.
The good old pros and cons sheet,
Yeah.
it never fails. It's never failed me.
No, I think that's definitely. I tried to. I've definitely done that probably every couple of years, which
Yeah.
seems to actually have coincided with the fact I change job every 2 years as well. But um, yeah, no, it's definitely something worth doing because, like you said, it might be that your I know your initial thought is you hate it, but actually it's just the people that you work with. You love the job, but
Yeah,
it's the people, or you love the job, but you're severely underpaid, and
exactly.
that gives a bit more clarity in terms of that decision making.
Yeah, definitely. And the other thing is just don't be afraid to speak to people. Like, if you're thinking of jumping the boat to another career, speak to other people who are in that career just so you can get an understanding, like what their day to day looks like. And it's really easy to use like Chat GPT and Google to figure out like the specifics, but it doesn't compare to actually speaking to an actual human about their experience.
Yeah, and I think we can probably guess the answer to this, but for those considering sales, is it a yes from you?
It's a yes, but with careful consideration. It's not an easy job. The bucks are big, but you've got to want it bad enough. And you have to have that determination, and that's what's going to keep pushing you through those bad days. So you need that sort of relentless attitude. And if you feel like you've got that mindset, then 110% I'll recommend sales.
But as good as Wolf of Wall Street was as a film, don't try and don't find yourself in a Wolf of Wall Street style company, because that's not very friendly.
That is a good takeaway.
A solid piece to finish on.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, no, like I said, thank you for jumping on. I will share the clips with you, share the recording. So feel free to share it. But for those that have listened or watched, thank you for listening or watching. And we will speak to you in the next episode.